In this video, I'm going to cover how to use viewports and what they are. So to start off, I'm going to start off in my model space. And from my last video, I mentioned that we do most of our designing in our model space, but we do all of our printing or plotting in our paper space. In the last video, we actually set up our paper space template over here. So I'm going to show you how to get from your design from model to paper space. So the first thing I want to do is let's start off over in model. And I want to make sure that my units of measure are correct. So I'm just going to type in units. And I'm going to change my length type from decimal, and I'm just going to use architectural. And angle decimal degrees is fine. I'm okay with my precision of 1/16 of an inch. We can get as precise as we need to here, but 1/16 is fine. I'm just going to hit OK. And I'm just going to draw a simple box. And to do that, I'm going to hit L for the line command. I'm going to start at 0, 0. And we have my line command here. As you can see, just real quick, I can go in the X and Y direction at 90-degree angles. If I want to turn that off, I can turn my ortho off, which is just F8 on my keyboard. And I see I have a full range of motion, but I'm going to keep my ortho on, so I have nice 90-degree angles. And let's make a line, let's say, 20 feet. So I'm just going to point my cursor in the up direction. 20 feet on my keyboard. I'm going to zoom out, pan down. Now I'm going to go to the right, 20 feet again. Go down 20 feet again, and to the left 20 feet, and hit escape to get out of my command. So this is totally your preference. Some folks like to have the grid on in the background. Personally, for things like this, I like to turn that off. So to turn off your grid, there's two ways to do it. The first way to do it is you can go down here to your display grid and turn that on and off by clicking on it or just toggling. Or the way I do it is I hit F7 on my keyboard, and you could toggle on and off. Again, depending on when you've learned AutoCAD and who your mentors are, you may pick up different ways of how to do the same exact command. Use whatever's best for you. So I have a nice square on my screen, and I'm just going to verify the size of my square again. So I'm just going to hit DI on my keyboard for distance. And I'm going to select the left line and the right line, and it is 20 feet in the X direction and 20 feet in the Y direction. Okay, this is great. So I want to take this 20-foot square, and I want to put it on a piece of paper where I could plot it. Okay, so we do that using viewports. Now, if I go down to my paper space, my ArcD template, which I set up in the last video, I have this grid right down here. Okay, and notice that nothing's really showing up. That's because I don't have any frame of scale. It's not large enough. So let's just say that I want that being this 20-foot square to fill up the majority of my D-size sheet of paper. All right. Now what I want to do is I want to take this little square right here, because this is actually a viewport. And a viewport is like taking your model space and putting it onto your paper space. Right. So watch what happens. If I take this and I expand, I'm going to hit F8 to get off my ortho. And I bring it out. And now if I double click inside of this viewport and scroll out, it's just like being in my model space. Again, I'm going to turn off my grid here. And the cool thing about viewports is even when I'm in my paper space, I can still modify my original drawing. So for example, let's say I'm gonna, so right now I am currently in my viewport, right? And I know that because down here it says model. All right, so I can switch between model or paper space. So now if I click off into the white spot in my paper space here, just double click there, you'll see that I now transferred to paper space. And as I pan around, I move my whole paper. Now if I double click inside my viewport, I switch back to model space. All right, so watch what happens when I'm in model space. And I just take a line, and I'm just going to draw a diagonal line inside of there. And I'm going to go back to my model tab. And you notice that I now have a line drawn through there. So you can, I guess you could, if you wanted to, you could be in a paper space and model everything in a viewport. Now, I don't recommend that. There's many different reasons, more advanced reasons we'll get into later, but try to get in the habit of doing most of your designs in model space. Okay, but just know that you can change things on the fly if you need to. But right now we have no frame of scale. Okay, well, all the thing I know right now is this is a 24 by 36 sheet of paper because it's my ArcD size. but I want to put this to some sort of scale. And the way that I do that is I just highlight my viewport. And down on the right hand side here, we have some arbitrary numbers. But if I click on this little flyout, I can select a specific scale that I want. So let's pick a common scale like 1/4 inch equals 1 foot. You'll see now that it scales down, okay? But you have to be very careful when you're scaling viewports down because you can inadvertently change your scale when you're kind of messing around in your viewports. And what I mean by that is if I double click inside my viewport again and just scroll in with my wheel, you'll notice that down here on the right hand side, the scale of my viewport is actually changing on the fly. Right? We don't want to do that, especially if we have an architectural drawing that's set for 1/4 inch scale or 1/8 inch scale, whatever it may be. We want to make sure that we lock our viewports. So let's say, for example, that I want this to display at 1/4 inch to 1. The way that I do that is I click off and make sure that I'm in my paper space. Again, I know that down here it says paper. I highlight my viewport, change it to 1/4 inch equals 1, just like I did last time. And then there's this little lock button right down here. This lock button is going to be your best buddy when you start getting to advanced sheet views, because whatever viewport is currently selected, if you click on lock, no matter how hard I try to double click inside of this model space, I cannot change the scale. All right. I can still go in there. I can still draw in model space if I needed to, but I cannot change the scale because it is locked. All right, so let's go and let's take a little print preview of this. So I'm going to switch back to my paper space, and you'll see I did that a little differently. You can either double click inside your viewport or outside your paper space, or you can click down here where it says paper, and you can click between paper and model space. Again, there's more than one way to do things in Autocad. So now I'm just going to go zoom extents, hit Z spacebar, E spacebar. And now I want to enter my my page manager or my plot manager. Now to do that, there's a couple different ways I can do it. I can go up to the top toolbar here and click on my plot button. I can click on the Autocad icon and go to print. Or the way that I do it, I hit Control P on my keyboard. And there's even another way. If you're command based, you can type in plot and it brings you to the same thing. All right. Now, from the last video, this is all going to look very familiar to the last video because we set up all of these parameters in the last video when we set up our page layout template. But I did notice one thing I have wrong here. I do not want arc expand D. I'm just going to make that regular arc D, and I'll change that later on. So here I want to do a print preview. So I'm going to click on preview. And you'll notice something weird here, right? Is that I have my actual viewport showing up in my print preview. I don't want that. And the reason why I don't want that is I may have several different viewports in here, okay? And so I'm gonna put this viewport on a different layer, which is gonna bring us, I'm just gonna hit escape. I'm gonna cancel out of here, which is kind of gonna introduce us into the subject of layers. Now think of layers as a bunch of different pieces of paper, like tracing paper on top of each other, where you could change colors and whatnot, and just make things a little more refined. We'll get into layers a little later on. But right now, I do want to set up a layer specifically for my viewport because that's what we're talking about. So what I want to do is go up here to my layer properties. And I'm going to click on layer properties. I opened up my other screen. Let me drag it on over. And currently right now, I only have one layer, which is my 0 layer. I try not to do a whole lot in my 0 layer. I try to have defined stuff. So what I want to do is I want to create a new layer. So I'm going to right click in 0. I'm going to hit new layer. And I'm going to name this layer Viewports. I'm going to change the color of my layer to magenta. Hit OK. And now you'll see here that I have a little icon of a printer. Now this printer, if I click on this printer, I could either say, okay, I want everything, I want the viewport itself to show in a plot or not show. Well, I don't want my actual viewport to show in a plot, and I'll show you that in a moment. But just for right now, I'm going to click on the printer. So I have that little, do not enter sign or do not plot sign. And I'm going to hit close. And now I'm going to select my viewport. And I'm going to pull my drop down layer here and just change that to viewports. Now you'll notice that it turned to magenta, right? Nothing else really changed, but if I hit Control P again to go to my print preview, you'll notice that that rectangle that was representative of my viewport is no longer there, okay? And let me show you why that's important. So I just hit escape. I'm going to cancel out of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my viewport and I'm going to shrink it on down because it doesn't need to be that big. I just need to show my square in here. Now let's say that I wanted one square that's at 1/4 inch to 1 and another square that's at 1/2 inch to 1. All right, so I'm going to move this by hitting M, enter, and just move it over here. And I'm going to put in a new viewport. To enter a new viewport, I'm simply going to type in the command viewports. And I could put in different types of, there's different ways you can set up your sheet. Whichever way is right for you is fine. Personally, for this, I'm going to use a single viewport and bring that in. And just left click and draw a box. And you'll see that it brings in my model space view. So anything that's in model space will automatically come over in any new viewports. And I made the mistake of not putting this on the correct layer, so I'm just going to highlight my viewport, drop down my viewport or my layer properties, and change it to viewports. Now again, I want to make so this one's at 1/4 inch to 1. I want this one to be at 1/2 inch to 1. So I'm going to click on or highlight my viewport. Go down to change the scale of my viewport in the bottom right. And I am going to select 1/2 inch equals 1. And it scaled it down. And once it scaled it down, I'm going to click on the lock button to lock it. And let's just say, for whatever reason, I had my viewports overlapping as such. All right. If I had my viewports on my 0 layer, and I did a print preview, Control P preview, you'll see that I have now have these, which could be representative as an object line in my print preview. I do not want that. Cancel out of here, and I'm going to change my layers of my viewports back to my viewport layer. Hit Control P again, do a print preview. You'll see that only the objects in my model space come back. Okay, so having viewports, you can do multiple viewports of different scales, different sizes. You can isolate different objects in your viewports, but it's important to have either a no plot layer or a viewport layer or a plot layer, something like that, somewhere where you can put your viewports. And it is good practice to get in to make sure that you kind of keep your viewports organized so that lines aren't overlaying on top of each other. So just as a recap, what we've done is we went into model space, we changed our units, we drew a simple object, and we came over into our page layout. And by using viewports, we were able to pop our viewports in to whatever scale we wanted to. We made sure that we locked our viewports, so this way we can plot our model.